On that fateful day, the day the Empire was attacked, all the crew, staff, and guests, including security personnel and Imperial officials with the exception of one, were killed when the terrorist organization known as the Rebel Alliance blew up the Death Star with a squad of single-man fighters. The terrorists detonated the central core with proton torpedoes, destroying the prominent political target. But could the destruction of the Death Star have been an inside job perpetrated by top-ranking Imperial officials and royalty? What really happened that day? What's the likelihood that a squad of one-man attack ships like the X-Wing could penetrate the defenses of a heavily fortified moon-sized battle station? Even if a ship was somehow able to slip through, the difficulty of torpedoing a tiny ventilation shaft necessary to detonate the core is extremely high. In fact, a decorated and experienced Rebel Alliance fighter pilot, Wedge Antilles, is quoted as saying, "It's impossible." So how did the attackers make it through the defensive turrets on the Death Star's surface and swarms of Imperial TIE fighters? Well, most of them didn't. Let's take a look at one of the few that did. Luke Skywalker piloted the Rebel Alliance-issued X-Wing fighter that, according to the official story, fired the 2 critical torpedoes into the 2-foot ventilation shaft opening. The impossible shot. Luke was a farm boy, raised by his aunt and uncle on a desert planet with little to no professional combat or flight training. Every other experienced Rebel fighter pilot that day was killed or failed in their attack run. So what made Luke different? One element might be his family connections. Anakin Skywalker, known also by the moniker Darth Vader, is the overseeing manager and one of the chief commanding officers on the Death Star. He outranks admirals and is second in command only to the Emperor himself. Anakin is also Luke Skywalker's father. Anakin Skywalker was on the Death Star as the commanding officer on that fateful day. For some reason, he made an unorthodox and unprecedented move to personally fly a TIE fighter in the battle. Recovered logs show he relieved the fully qualified TIE fighter squad leader of his duty and assumed command of the squad conveniently just as Luke, his own son, was readying the final stages of the attack along the surface of the Death Star. Why would the highest in command of the most powerful battle station give up control and take on such a menial task as piloting a single fighter? It makes sense when one learns that he was the only member of the Imperial forces to survive the attack. Let's look at the events leading up to the detonation. The Death Star's defenses easily staved off most of the Rebel Alliance terrorists until the only remaining fighter was Luke's X-Wing. As he approached the ventilation duct along the trench, his father Anakin was now leading the 3 TIE fighters in direct pursuit. Logs show pilots in the TIE fighter squads were prepared to fire on Luke's X-Wing when they were ordered to stand down by Anakin Skywalker himself. Was he simply protecting his own son? Or was he setting the stage for a larger plan? It's worth noting that the experienced veteran pilot was unable to hit the bent target with the same X-Wing, the same torpedoes, from the same position as Luke. Directly after Wedge's failed run, Luke, with no training, was able to make 1,000,000 in one shot, all the while being followed and protected by his own father. Isn't it possible that the torpedoes never had to hit their target at all for their plan to work? Unconfirmed reports indicate a third-party ship was present. This ship was not on record as being of Rebel Alliance or Imperial origin. Reports identify it as a Carillion-class fighter vessel, often modified and used by smugglers and mercenaries. This very ship was seen docked at the Death Star just prior to the attacks, and may have been used to smuggle key members of both Imperial and Rebel connections. Could Anakin have planned for a mercenary smuggling ship to detonate explosives? The Rebel plan was based on structural and defensive intelligence of the Death Star, gathered under suspicious circumstances, raising even more questions. The root origins of the intel is unknown, but they somehow ended up in the hands of Leia Organa Solo, who was the Princess of Alderaan, the leader of the terrorist group Rebel Alliance, and you guessed it, the daughter of Anakin and sister of Luke. Leia Organa Solo, also known as Leia Amidala Skywalker, was on a transport ship with the intelligence not long before the Death Star was destroyed. The transport ship was intercepted by an Imperial-class destroyer commanded by her own father, Anakin. The intelligence was uploaded to an R2 android and translation droid, now determined to have been created by Anakin Skywalker himself. Why would the leader of the terrorist group choose to use androids created by the enemy? Could it be the plans were meant to end up in terrorist hands all along? Not convinced yet? From the time her transport ship was intercepted by her father's Imperial destroyer, records show she was taken to the Death Star, and multiple witnesses state she was seen in the Death Star control room when the planet she was princess of, Aldebaran, was destroyed and all its inhabitants killed. Her brother Luke then secretly transported her directly to the Rebel Alliance facility to head the final stages, the attack and destruction of the Death Star itself. Witnesses report she was transported in a Corellian freighter vessel exactly like the one reported to have assisted Anakin and Luke blow up the Death Star and escape. Isn't it quite possible that Leia was working with her father and brother, a family who felt destined to control the galaxy itself? Could the Death Star have been destroyed by Anakin to protect his daughter and hide evidence of her involvement with the Aldebaran tragedy? Or perhaps it was for pure profits, as the contracts for constructing the second Death Star were awarded to Anakin Skywalker's very own construction company. Or maybe it was as the official story goes, a simple farm boy with minimal combat training while working for his sister's terrorist group manages to blow up the most heavily fortified battle station ever made that happened to belong to his father, who happened to be the only surviving crew member that day. You decide.